The mall was buzzing that afternoon, filled with the usual mix of shoppers moving from store to store. Families wandered slowly, couples held hands, and teenagers laughed loudly as they passed the fountain in the center. The smell of coffee and baked goods floated through the air, mingling with the faint scent of perfume from nearby stores. Amid all this, a young black girl stepped into a high-end clothing store, her backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes scanning the neatly arranged racks. She moved with care, trying to appear confident even though her heart was racing. She had been looking forward to this little shopping trip all week. It was a treat she had promised herself after finishing a big project at school. She was careful, choosing her path around the store, not wanting to disturb anything. Her eyes lingered on a display of shoes, sparkling under the bright lights. She reached out to touch a pair, turning them slightly to see the angle from which they shined best. Everything felt normal, ordinary even. But then she noticed it. The manager, a white woman in her 40s, had stopped what she was doing and was staring at her. Not the polite glance people sometimes gave, but a look that made her skin crawl. The kind of look that made someone feel like they were being watched for something they hadn't done. The girl tried to ignore the stare, telling herself she was overthinking it. Maybe the manager was just being protective of the store. Maybe it was nothing. She tried to focus on the shoes, pretending to be interested, but her heart wouldn't calm. She felt a strange tension in the air, a weight pressing down on her. Every step she took seemed to be followed, every move noticed. The manager's eyes followed her as she walked over to the dresses, lingering on the expensive fabric. She tried to act normal, her hands steady, her movements careful. She didn't want to give the manager any reason to suspect her, even though she hadn't done anything wrong. Suddenly, the manager moved toward her, brisk and sharp. The girl froze, unsure of what to say or do. The manager's voice was calm, almost casual, but it carried an edge that made the girl's stomach twist. She could hear a few words, something about being suspicious, but the sentences were jumbled and not clear. The girl tried to respond politely, saying she was just looking, that she wasn't doing anything wrong. But the manager's expression didn't change. It was as if she had already decided something, as if the girl's words didn't matter at all. Then the manager did something that made the girl's blood run cold. She picked up the phone and dialed a number, speaking softly but with authority. The girl couldn't hear everything, but she caught the word police. Her eyes widened and her hands trembled slightly. She had never been in a situation like this before. Her heart pounded in her chest, a rapid beat that felt like it would burst out. She didn't know whether to leave, to run, or to stay put. She was stuck, trapped between wanting to defend herself and fearing what might happen if she did. A few customers nearby started to notice the tension. Some whispered to each other, glancing nervously at the girl and the manager. Others pretended not to notice, but the weight of the situation was hard to ignore. The girl felt every gaze, every quiet comment pressing down on her like a heavy cloak. She felt embarrassed, humiliated, even though she had done nothing wrong. Her cheeks burned and she tried to steady her breathing, telling herself to stay calm. She reminded herself she was just shopping, that she had a right to be there, but the words felt hollow against the reality of what was happening. Time seemed to stretch. She could hear the faint sound of the manager speaking on the phone, explaining something in clipped sentences. She didn't catch every word, but she understood the meaning. The police were coming. Her stomach twisted further and she swallowed hard. She tried to keep her hands visible to show she wasn't a threat, but every instinct screamed that this wasn't fair. She was just a girl, quietly browsing in a store, and suddenly she felt like she was being accused of something terrible, something she had no control over. Her mind raced with questions. Why her? Why now? She had seen other customers come and go without issue. She had watched people from different backgrounds walk in, and none of them had been treated like this. She felt a sharp sting of injustice, a confusion that mixed with fear. She wanted to speak up, to explain, to tell someone she was not a criminal, but the words caught in her throat. She felt small, invisible, yet painfully exposed at the same time. As she stood there, trying to keep herself composed, she noticed the other staff members watching. Some looked uncomfortable, some avoided her eyes entirely. It was as if the store had frozen around her, the normal flow of shopping halted by the tension. She felt like she was under a microscope, every gesture analyzed, every movement judged. Her stomach knotted tighter and she had to remind herself to breathe. One slow inhale, one slow exhale, she told herself, trying to calm the panic rising inside. Then she heard footsteps approaching from behind. Her body tensed. The manager was walking toward her again, this time with a slight stiffness, a forced calm that only made the situation worse. She could see the phone pressed against her ear, and she guessed it was probably for the police to arrive quickly. The girl wanted to speak, to assert herself, but every word felt trapped, stuck in her throat. She was paralyzed by the absurdity of the moment. She had done nothing wrong, and yet here she was, being treated like a suspect in a store where she only wanted to spend a little time. Other customers shifted uncomfortably, some giving her sympathetic looks. She caught a few murmured comments, soft voices that she couldn't quite hear clearly, but even the small gestures of support weren't enough to make the fear go away. She felt exposed, judged, and unfairly targeted. The bright lights of the store, the sparkling displays, the neatly arranged racks, all of it felt suddenly hostile, as if the environment itself had turned against her. Minutes felt like hours. Every second dragged as she waited, unsure what would happen next. The tension in the air was thick, almost tangible. She tried to focus on anything else, the colors of the clothes, the shine of the shoes, but her mind kept returning to the unfairness of the situation. She was a young girl, and yet she felt like she was on trial, every gaze scrutinizing, every step watched. The embarrassment burned hotter as she tried to make herself small, to stay invisible. But invisibility seemed impossible under the manager's watchful eye. Finally, she heard the distant sound of sirens, a faint but unmistakable wail that made her heart skip. She could see the flicker of red and blue lights reflecting on the mall's polished floors. The police were arriving, and the weight on her chest grew heavier. She felt cornered, trapped by circumstances she had no control over. She felt a deep sense of helplessness, a mix of fear, humiliation, and confusion. She wished desperately that someone she trusted could appear, someone who would understand and protect her. She wished her mother were there, someone who could explain, someone who could make this all stop. As the footsteps of the police grew louder, she took a shaky breath and tried to remind herself she was doing nothing wrong. She had every right to be there, to walk, to look, to shop quietly. And yet, standing in that store, under the suspicious gaze of the manager, she felt a deep ache of injustice that words could not express. The tension was suffocating, and she felt a tear threaten to slip down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, refusing to give the manager any satisfaction, but the fear lingered. The mall, the store, the bright lights, all of it felt like it had closed in on her, trapping her in a moment she could not escape. Every second passed slowly. She tried to steady her hands, to keep her composure, to act like nothing was wrong. But the reality was clear. She was being treated differently, unfairly, because of who she was. The feeling was sharp, bitter, and completely bewildering. She had been raised to believe in fairness, to treat others with respect. And yet here she was, facing a situation that defied all sense of justice. The unfairness was palpable, heavy in the air, and she felt powerless to change it. She could only stand there hoping, wishing, praying that someone would understand, that someone would intervene, that this nightmare would end soon. The sound of sirens grew louder as the police car approached the mall. The young girl felt her stomach twist into knots, her hands clenching tightly in front of her. She tried to stay calm, telling herself over and over that she had done nothing wrong. Yet the feeling of fear would not go away. She could hear the murmurs of other shoppers around her, soft voices questioning what was happening. Some looked curious, some sympathetic, and some seemed annoyed by the disruption. She felt exposed, as though everyone in the store was judging her, even though she hadn't done anything to deserve it. The manager kept her distance now, but her eyes never left the girl. She spoke quietly into the phone, giving instructions and explaining the situation. The girl could barely follow the words, but she understood enough to know the manager was framing her as a potential threat, someone who didn't belong. It was surreal, like being trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. She felt her pulse racing and her chest tighten. She wanted to cry, but she forced herself to stay quiet, to keep control. A few of the other employees lingered nearby, unsure where to stand or what to do. Some avoided eye contact entirely, while one young woman fidgeted with a clipboard, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. It was obvious that the manager's reaction was extreme, and the girl wished someone would step in, even if quietly, to support her. But the store seemed frozen, held hostage by the manager's fear and prejudice. She felt isolated, her voice drowned out by authority she had no power to challenge. Then finally, the police arrived. 2 officers stepped into the store, their badges glinting under the bright lights. They approached cautiously, speaking softly to the manager. She repeated her concerns, her tone firm, but it lacked the confidence it had earlier. The girl could see it now, the uncertainty behind her eyes. The officers turned toward the girl and asked her a few questions. She answered politely, keeping her hands visible, speaking slowly to make sure there was no misunderstanding. Her voice shook slightly, betraying the fear she felt inside. She wasn't dangerous. She was just a girl who wanted to shop peacefully. One officer nodded as he listened, his expression neutral but attentive. The other kept a careful eye on the manager, sensing the tension in the room. The girl noticed that some of the other customers had gathered near the back, whispering and watching. She felt self-conscious, wishing she could disappear. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with a small spark of hope. Maybe someone would recognize that she was being treated unfairly. Maybe justice could be restored before it went too far. The manager's voice rose slightly. Her sentences clipped and hurried. She painted a picture of suspicion, implying that the girl had done something wrong even though there was no evidence. The girl's heart sank further. She had hoped that simply being polite and honest would be enough, but the reality was harsher. The manager's prejudice was loud, and for a moment the girl felt powerless. Her mind raced with thoughts of unfairness and fear. How could someone see her, a quiet, respectful young girl, and immediately assume the worst? She struggled to stay calm, reminding herself to breathe, to keep her composure. As the officers spoke with the manager, the girl took a moment to observe the store. The bright lights and neatly arranged shelves seemed almost surreal now, a backdrop to the tense scene unfolding. She could see reflections of herself in the glass displays, her own anxious expression staring back. It was a strange, almost dreamlike feeling. Standing there while people around her whispered and watched, she felt trapped, caught in a situation she hadn't asked for, judged for something she had never done. One of the officers finally turned to her, speaking in a calm voice. He asked her to explain what she was doing in the store. She spoke honestly, her words clear and polite. She described browsing the racks, looking at shoes and clothes, enjoying a quiet afternoon. She emphasized that she had not touched anything improperly, had not stolen anything, and had not done anything threatening. The officer nodded slowly, taking in her words. For the first time since the situation began, she felt a small sense of relief. Someone was listening, someone was hearing her truth. The manager interrupted, trying to add more details, her tone defensive. The girl felt frustration rising, but she kept silent. She knew arguing would not help. The officers listened carefully, then spoke to the manager again. Their tone was professional but firm, and it was clear they were weighing the situation carefully. The girl's fear began to mix with hope, a cautious feeling that maybe this could be resolved without further escalation. She still felt humiliated, but seeing the officers treat her words with respect made her feel slightly safer. Other shoppers continued to observe, some whispering to each other, some watching quietly. The girl could feel their attention, a mix of curiosity and empathy. She wished she could explain the situation to them, but she knew it was not her responsibility. All she could do was remain calm and honest, showing through her actions that she was innocent. She focused on keeping her hands visible, her posture composed, and her voice steady. Each slow breath helped, grounding her in the moment despite the tension. The store manager's frustration grew, and she glanced nervously at the approaching police car outside. Unsure of how the situation would unfold, the girl could sense the change in energy, the shift from authority to uncertainty. The officers were taking the girl seriously, and that was a small victory in the midst of humiliation. She took comfort in the idea that truth and fairness still had a chance to prevail. The tension was thick, but the presence of law enforcement added a measure of control to an otherwise chaotic situation. As the minutes passed, the girl felt herself calming slightly, even as fear lingered. She realized she was not alone, that the world could see the injustice being done. She remembered the advice her mother had given her about standing tall, speaking clearly, and trusting herself. That memory strengthened her resolve. She held her head high, her eyes focused, her body composed. She was still scared, but she refused to let the fear overwhelm her completely. The officers spoke quietly among themselves, occasionally glancing at the manager and the girl. It was clear they were weighing the facts, assessing the credibility of each account. The girl felt a mix of nervousness and hope, watching as they moved with careful deliberation. Every second felt significant, each moment a test of patience and courage. She knew the situation could change at any moment, but she remained steadfast, determined to remain composed and honest. One officer finally addressed the manager, his tone calm but firm. He asked if she was sure of the situation and suggested reconsidering her actions. The girl noticed a flicker of uncertainty cross the manager's face. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to give the girl a sense that the tide might be turning. She took another slow breath, feeling a glimmer of hope that fairness might prevail. The humiliation was still there, heavy and sharp, but the recognition of truth and honesty brought a small relief. The girl thought about how surreal it was that a simple shopping trip could turn into something so tense and frightening. She had only wanted a quiet afternoon, a moment of normalcy, and yet she found herself in the center of a conflict born of prejudice and fear. She felt a mixture of sadness and frustration, but also a sense of strength. She was enduring something unfair, and still she remained composed. That in itself was a quiet victory, a testament to her resilience. As the officers continued to speak with the manager, the girl allowed herself a small thought of gratitude. She was grateful that the police seemed to understand her side, that someone was listening. She thought about her family, wishing her mother could be there to support her, to stand with her in this moment. The thought brought a bittersweet comfort, a reminder of both the support she had and the challenges she faced. She felt her resolve harden, a quiet determination that no matter what happened, she would remain calm and truthful, and she would not let fear or prejudice define her experience. The store remained tense, but the girl's mind began to settle slightly. She focused on her breathing, on keeping her hands visible, on speaking clearly if needed. She observed the other shoppers, noticing small signs of empathy, small gestures of understanding. Some were whispering quietly to each other, sharing their discomfort with the situation. Others were simply watching, perhaps reflecting on the unfairness they were witnessing. The girl felt the weight of the moment, heavy yet significant, a lesson in resilience and patience. Finally, the girl realized that she could not control everything, but she could control herself. She could stay honest, composed, and polite, and that alone gave her strength. She held her head high, her posture straight and her hands visible. She allowed herself a small, cautious hope that the situation would be resolved fairly. She reminded herself that she was not alone, that truth was on her side, and that her dignity remained intact, even in the face of fear and humiliation. And as the officers continued to manage the situation, she stood quietly, patiently, and bravely, ready to face whatever came next. The tension in the store was at its peak. The girl stood quietly, hoping the situation would resolve soon, when the sound of a car pulling into the parking lot caught her attention. She turned slightly, curiosity and hope mixing with fear. A sleek black car had arrived, and a tall, confident woman stepped out. There was something in the way she carried herself that made people notice immediately. She walked toward the store with a calm authority that seemed to shift the energy around her. Her presence was commanding without being loud, and everyone in the store instinctively stepped back, giving her space. The girl's heart leapt as she recognized her mother. Relief flooded her body, washing away some of the fear that had been building over the last tense minutes. Her mother's eye met hers, and the girl felt a wave of reassurance. She wasn't alone anymore. Her mother's presence was a shield, a source of strength that she hadn't realized she needed until this very moment. She wanted to rush toward her to feel safe, but the situation was still delicate. She took a deep breath, trying to remain composed as her mother approached. The store manager, who had been confident and assertive only moments ago, now looked uncertain. She straightened her posture but couldn't hide the unease in her eyes. The girl's mother entered the store, her gaze sweeping across the room, taking in every detail. She noticed the manager, the police officers, the customers, and of course her daughter. Her expression was calm but firm, and it immediately demanded attention. It was clear she was a person used to authority, someone who did not accept nonsense lightly. The girl's mother approached slowly, speaking in a quiet but commanding voice. She asked the manager to explain what had happened. The manager hesitated, her words coming out rushed and defensive. She tried to justify her actions, claiming she had concerns about theft, about behavior, about the safety of the store, but her explanation sounded weak even to her own ears. The girl's mother listened carefully, her eyes never leaving the manager's face. There was no anger, only clarity and focus. It was as if she could see through every excuse, every attempt to shift blame and cut straight to the truth. The officers stood nearby, watching the interaction closely. They had already seen the girl's side of the story, and now they were seeing the authority and presence of her mother. It became clear to them that the situation had escalated unnecessarily. The manager's confidence faltered as she tried to speak, her voice wavering slightly. The girl's mother remained composed, speaking in measured tones, asking pointed questions that highlighted the absurdity of the manager's actions. Every word she spoke carried weight, and the atmosphere in the store began to change. The customers in the store, who had been watching nervously, began to shift as well. Some exchanged glances, recognizing the power and composure of the woman who had just entered. The sense of tension remained, but it was now balanced by a feeling of accountability. The manager, who had seemed untouchable moments ago, now looked small and uncertain. Her previous authority was stripped away by the presence of someone who could speak with true influence. The girl felt a mixture of relief and pride. Relief that her mother was here to support her, to protect her from an unfair situation. Pride in the strength and calm authority her mother displayed. She realized how much difference it made to have someone powerful and composed on her side. She watched as her mother calmly addressed the police officers and the manager, explaining the girl's innocence and emphasizing the unacceptability of racial profiling. Her voice was steady, her words clear, leaving no room for misunderstanding. The manager tried to interrupt, to defend herself, but her words fell flat. The girl's mother did not need to raise her voice. Her presence and confidence spoke louder than any argument. She explained the situation from her perspective, making it clear that her daughter had done nothing wrong and that the manager's actions were inappropriate. The officers nodded, taking in the facts and reassessing the situation. The energy in the store shifted further, the tension beginning to dissolve as the truth became undeniable. The girl watched in awe as her mother handled the situation with grace and precision. She had never seen her mother like this, commanding a room without anger, without aggression, simply through authority and clarity. The girl felt a mixture of admiration and reassurance. She realized that this was what true support looked like. Someone who could stand by her side, advocate for her, and restore fairness without losing composure. As the conversation continued, the manager's words became less confident, her excuses less convincing. The girl's mother asked pointed questions, calmly pressing for clarity and accountability. The manager stumbled, unable to provide satisfactory answers. The officers observed quietly, their expressions indicating that they understood the situation and recognized the manager's actions as misguided. The girl felt her fear slowly ebbing, replaced by a growing sense of security and validation. Other shoppers in the store began to murmur quietly among themselves. Some nodded subtly, acknowledging the fairness of the girl's position and the strength of her mother's intervention. The girl felt a quiet pride, knowing that her mother's presence had changed the course of the situation. She realized that having someone who believed in her, who could stand up for her, made an enormous difference. She felt grateful and relieved, a mix of emotions that warmed her heart despite the lingering discomfort of the incident. The officers spoke privately with the manager for a few moments, clearly reviewing the situation and deciding on the appropriate next steps. The girl's mother stood calmly beside her, her presence a constant source of support. The girl could feel the power of the moment, the shift from fear and vulnerability to strength and fairness. She felt a sense of hope, knowing that the unjust treatment she had faced would not go unchecked. She had been seen, heard, and supported in a way that restored her dignity. Finally, one of the officers addressed the manager publicly, making it clear that the girl had done nothing wrong and that the manager's concerns had been unfounded. The words were firm but professional, emphasizing the importance of fairness and impartiality. The girl felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a mixture of relief and quiet triumph. She had been treated unfairly, but now justice was being recognized and affirmed. The manager looked embarrassed, her posture stiff, her face showing clear signs of discomfort. She muttered an apology, but it lacked conviction. The girl's mother nodded politely, but made it clear that the apology was not enough. There needed to be accountability and understanding to prevent such incidents in the future. The girl felt reassured, knowing that her mother would not let the situation be brushed aside. She felt supported, validated, and proud. As the officers began to step back, allowing the situation to resolve, the girl realized that she had learned something important. She had faced fear, humiliation and unfairness, and yet she had survived with dignity. She had been supported by someone she trusted and respected, someone who could turn an unjust situation into a moment of empowerment. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and a quiet pride in her own resilience. The store slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though the tension lingered faintly in the air. The girl and her mother stood together, their presence commanding respect and attention. The shoppers who had been observing began to resume their browsing, some with thoughtful expressions, others with quiet nods of understanding. The girl felt a sense of calm wash over her, a reassurance that justice had been recognized and that she had been seen clearly in a situation that had felt overwhelming and unfair. The girl's mother leaned slightly toward her, speaking softly and reassuringly. She reminded her daughter that she had done nothing wrong, that her composure had been admirable, and that together they had navigated a challenging moment successfully. The girl felt tears threaten to fall, but they were tears of relief and gratitude rather than fear. She realized that the support and presence of someone who believed in her could make all the difference in moments of injustice. As they prepared to leave the store, the girl took one last look around. She noticed the manager's embarrassed expression, the officer's nods of acknowledgement, and the quiet whispers of other customers. The moment had been intense, frightening, and unfair, but it had also been transformative. The girl felt stronger, more confident, and more aware of her own resilience. She understood that courage could be quiet, that strength could be calm, and that support could change everything. The girl and her mother walked toward the exit, their steps steady and composed. The mall's usual sounds returned around them, the laughter of children, the hum of conversation, the distant clatter of footsteps. But the girl felt a sense of clarity and empowerment she had not felt before. She had faced fear and injustice and emerged with her dignity intact, supported by someone who believed in her and could stand with her. It was a lesson she would carry with her forever, a reminder that even in the face of unfairness, strength, courage, and support could turn the tide. The girl's mother stood beside her, her presence commanding and composed. She spoke directly to the manager, her tone calm but firm. Every word was measured, leaving no room for excuses. She asked the manager to explain why the police had been called, why her daughter had been treated as though she was suspicious or dangerous. The manager stumbled over her words, trying to justify her actions, but her explanations felt hollow. She cited vague concerns about safety and theft, but there was no evidence, no incident, no behavior that justified what had happened. The officers listened carefully, their expressions neutral but serious, clearly considering the situation and the credibility of each account. The girl stood silently beside her mother, feeling a sense of relief but also awe. She had never seen her mother handle a situation like this, commanding attention without raising her voice, making everyone in the room pay attention and think. It was a mix of calm authority and unwavering focus that made it impossible to ignore her. The girl felt safe, protected, and understood in a way she hadn't before. She realized how much her mother's presence had changed everything. The tension that had seemed so suffocating just moments ago was starting to shift, replaced by a sense of accountability and clarity. The manager looked uncomfortable, her confidence fading as her excuses were gently but firmly questioned. The girl's mother asked precise questions, showing that she understood the situation completely. She explained to the officers and the manager that her daughter had done nothing wrong, that racial bias had influenced the manager's behavior, and that such treatment was unacceptable in any store. Her words were clear, factual, and unwavering. She made it known that she expected accountability, not just a quick apology. The officers nodded subtly, clearly recognizing that the girl's mother's perspective was accurate. They had already seen the girl's innocence, but now with her mother's calm intervention, the situation's unfairness was undeniable. The girl could see the shift in the manager's demeanor, from authority to embarrassment, from confidence to hesitation. The store had become a stage, and her mother's presence was changing the narrative. The girl felt a wave of pride and relief, knowing she was no longer facing the situation alone. The customers who had been watching began to whisper among themselves. Some exchanged looks of disbelief at what had happened, while others nodded subtly, acknowledging that the girl had been unfairly treated. The girl could feel the attention, but now it felt different, less like judgment and more like recognition of the injustice she had faced. She felt her shoulders relax slightly, knowing that truth and fairness were becoming visible, recognized by those around her. The mother continued to speak, calmly but firmly addressing the manager and the officers. She explained the importance of understanding and acknowledging bias and how assumptions could lead to harm and humiliation. She emphasized that her daughter had been innocent, that her behavior was perfectly normal, and that the manager's actions had been entirely unwarranted. Her tone was persuasive without being confrontational, making it impossible for anyone to dismiss her words. The girl felt her heart lift, feeling the weight of fear and tension slowly being replaced by security and reassurance. The manager tried to respond, but her words were unconvincing. The officers listened, but their expressions suggested they understood the real issue. The girl's mother had brought clarity, and the manager's attempts to explain themselves only highlighted their mistake. The girl felt a sense of justice beginning to take shape, a feeling that fairness was returning to the situation. It was a powerful, almost overwhelming sense of relief, knowing that someone was standing firmly on her side, advocating for her truth. The girl watched her mother's every movement, taking in the way she remained calm, composed, and authoritative. She realized that this was strength that didn't rely on yelling, anger, or intimidation. Her mother's confidence and clear sense of justice were enough to change the course of events. The girl felt inspired, seeing firsthand the impact of presence, patience, and understanding. She knew that she would carry this lesson with her for the rest of her life. The officers addressed the manager, making it clear that the girl's innocence was recognized and that the situation had been mishandled. They emphasized that the manager's concerns were unfounded, and that future interactions should be guided by fairness and respect. The girl felt a deep sense of relief. The situation, which had felt so overwhelming, was finally being resolved with clarity and justice. She felt validated, understood, and supported in a way that made the fear and humiliation she had experienced moments ago seem smaller in comparison. The manager looked increasingly uncomfortable, her apologies hesitant and unconvincing. The girl's mother maintained her calm demeanor, insisting that actions would be taken to ensure such incidents did not happen again. She made it clear that accountability was necessary, and that fairness must be maintained for everyone, regardless of race or background. The girl felt reassured, knowing that her mother would not let the situation go unresolved. The presence of authority, empathy, and clarity had turned what had been a terrifying experience into a moment of empowerment. The girl glanced around the store, noticing the reactions of other shoppers. Some looked impressed, others quietly thoughtful, and a few appeared relieved that justice was being acknowledged. The officers maintained their professional stance, but the girl could sense their recognition of the situation's unfairness. She felt a quiet pride in herself and her mother, knowing that they had faced fear and bias and come through with dignity. The moment was significant, not only for her personal experience but as a broader example of fairness and accountability. Her mother spoke softly now, addressing her daughter directly, reminding her that she had done nothing wrong and that she had handled herself with poise and grace. The girl felt a wave of gratitude and warmth. The support she had received, combined with the calm and firm handling of the situation by her mother, gave her confidence she had never felt before. She realized that moments of injustice could be met with strength and dignity, and that having someone to stand with you could make an enormous difference. As the officers prepared to leave, satisfied that the situation was under control, the girl's mother took a few final steps to ensure the matter would be documented properly. She spoke with the manager, clearly stating that there would be follow-up actions to prevent such incidents in the future. The girl observed, feeling the weight of the experience lighten. The tension that had gripped her from the moment the police were called began to fade. She felt seen, heard, and respected. The relief was almost physical, a deep breath she had been holding for what felt like an eternity. The girl's mother turned to her, giving her a reassuring smile. She praised her daughter's composure and patience, reminding her that she had been brave and strong. The girl felt tears threaten to fall, but they were tears of relief, gratitude, and quiet pride. She had endured a moment of fear and humiliation, but with support and calm authority, the situation had been resolved. The lesson she had learned was profound. Courage, truth, and support could overcome fear, prejudice, and injustice. The manager looked defeated, her posture slumped and her eyes downcast. Her authority had been challenged, and the situation had exposed the weakness in her actions. The girl felt a sense of closure, knowing that the unfair treatment had been addressed. The officers gave final nods of acknowledgement, and the store began to return to its usual rhythm. The atmosphere was still tinged with tension, but it was now mixed with recognition of fairness and justice. The girl felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had navigated a difficult and unfair situation with the help of someone who truly supported her. As the girl and her mother prepared to leave the store, the girl took a moment to reflect. She had faced fear, humiliation, and prejudice, and yet she had emerged with dignity and tact. She had witnessed the power of calm authority, the importance of standing up for oneself, and the profound impact of having someone who believes in you. The experience had been challenging, but it had also been empowering. She felt a renewed sense of confidence and resilience, a reminder that even in moments of injustice, strength and dignity could prevail. Walking toward the exit, the girl felt her mother's hand on her shoulder, a reassuring and grounding touch. She felt the warmth of support, the strength of advocacy, and the power of calm authority all at once. The mall's usual sounds, the chatter of shoppers, the laughter of children, the distant footsteps, felt different now. They were no longer a backdrop to fear and tension, but a setting for resilience, justice, and empowerment. The girl understood that this was a moment she would carry with her forever, a lesson in courage, fairness, and the importance of standing strong in the face of prejudice. As the girl and her mother walked toward the exit of the store, a quiet sense of resolution settled over them. The tension that had gripped the girl since the police were called had finally eased. She could feel the weight lifting from her shoulders, the fear and humiliation beginning to fade, replaced by a growing sense of confidence and pride. She realized that what had started as a terrifying experience had transformed into a moment of empowerment and clarity. Her mother's calm and authoritative presence had not only protected her, but had also taught her a valuable lesson about strength and courage. The shoppers in the store began to resume their normal activities, though some still glanced curiously toward the girl and her mother. A few exchanged whispers, clearly discussing what had happened, while others simply returned to browsing, their expressions thoughtful. The girl noticed these subtle reactions and felt a quiet reassurance. The unfair treatment she had experienced was being acknowledged, even indirectly, by those who had witnessed it. She felt seen and understood in a way that went beyond words. As they passed the entrance, the girl's mother placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She spoke softly, praising her daughter for her composure and patience throughout the ordeal. The girl felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of relief, pride, and gratitude. She realized that she had endured a moment of fear and humiliation without losing her dignity, and she had emerged stronger because of it. The presence and support of someone who believed in her had made all the difference. Outside, the mall was bustling with activity. Families walked past, couples held hands, and children laughed as they ran toward the fountain. The normal rhythm of life continued, indifferent to the intense moments that had just unfolded inside the store. Yet for the girl, the experience had shifted something deep within her. She had learned the importance of standing tall, even in the face of fear and prejudice. She had witnessed the power of calm authority and the impact of advocating for what is right. As they moved through the crowd, the girl's mother spoke to her about what had happened. She explained the importance of recognizing bias, of understanding when people's assumptions are influenced by prejudice, and of responding with clarity and dignity. She reminded her daughter that she had done nothing wrong and that the situation had been a reflection of someone else's unfairness, not her own actions. The girl listened intently, absorbing every word. She felt a sense of empowerment growing within her, a confidence that she could carry forward into her daily life. The mother also emphasized the importance of speaking up and seeking support when faced with injustice. She explained that courage did not always mean confrontation or anger. Sometimes it meant remaining composed, honest, and patient, while allowing truth and fairness to prevail. The girl nodded, understanding that the strength she had witnessed in her mother was not just about authority but about wisdom, patience, and clarity. She felt inspired, realizing that she could embody those same qualities in her own way. As they continued walking, the girl thought back to the moments inside the store, the fear, the embarrassment, the uncertainty. She remembered how every step had felt scrutinized, every gaze had felt heavy, and every second had felt long and suffocating. Yet she also remembered the turning point, the moment when her mother arrived and the energy shifted. She realized that even in the darkest moments, there could be a shift toward fairness and understanding, especially when someone stood with you and supported your truth. The girl also reflected on the impact their presence had on the manager and the officers. The manager had been forced to confront her own biases and recognize the harm her actions had caused. The officers had been reminded of the importance of fairness, patience, and listening carefully before acting. The girl understood that these moments, while difficult, could lead to greater awareness and change. She felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that the experience, though challenging, had the potential to influence others positively. As they left the mall, the girl's mother suggested they take a moment to sit and reflect. They found a quiet bench outside, away from the crowd, and sat together. The mother encouraged her daughter to express her feelings, to acknowledge the fear and humiliation she had experienced, and to recognize the strength and composure she had maintained. The girl spoke softly, describing how frightened she had been and how supported she felt when her mother arrived. She admitted that the experience had been overwhelming but also empowering. Her mother listened, nodding, and offered gentle reassurance and wisdom. The conversation continued, and the girl realized how much she had grown in just a short period. She had faced fear, prejudice, and unfair treatment, and she had navigated it with honesty and dignity. She had learned the value of support, the power of presence, and the importance of standing tall even when others doubt or judge you unfairly. The mother's guidance and calm authority had shown her that strength could take many forms, and that fairness and justice often require patience, clarity, and courage. As they stood to leave the bench, the girl felt a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that life would present challenges and moments of unfairness, but she also knew that she had the tools and support to face them with dignity and resilience. The experience had been difficult, but it had also been transformative, teaching her lessons that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The girl and her mother walked through the parking lot, the sunlight warming their faces. The normal rhythm of life continued around them, but they carried with them a new sense of clarity and strength. The girl felt proud of herself, grateful for her mother's support and inspired by the lessons she had learned. She understood that courage and fairness were not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes they were quiet, steady, and unwavering, demonstrated through calm presence, clarity, and the willingness to stand up for what is right. As they reached the car, the girl took a moment to look back at the mall. She thought about the people who had witnessed the events, the lessons they might carry with them, and the subtle shifts in awareness that had occurred. She felt a sense of hope, believing that even small actions and moments could contribute to greater understanding and fairness. She realized that her experience, though personal and challenging, had the potential to inspire awareness, empathy, and change in others. The girl and her mother got into the car, the engine humming to life. As they drove away, the girl felt a mixture of relief, gratitude, and empowerment. She understood that the fear and humiliation she had experienced were temporary, but the lessons and strength she had gained would stay with her forever. She felt proud of herself, thankful for her mother, and ready to face the world with a renewed sense of confidence and resilience. In the days that followed, the incident became a point of reflection for the girl. She spoke with friends and family, sharing her experience and the lessons she had learned. She felt a sense of pride in how she had handled the situation and in the support she had received. She also noticed subtle changes in her own confidence and perspective, a deeper understanding of fairness, empathy, and the importance of standing up for oneself and others. The girl knew that the experience would stay with her, a reminder of the challenges she had faced and the strength she had discovered within herself. She understood that moments of injustice could be turned into lessons of courage and empowerment, especially when met with support, clarity, and resilience. She carried with her the knowledge that even in difficult and unfair situations, dignity, composure, and truth could prevail. Looking back, the girl realized that the day had been transformative. What began as a terrifying and humiliating experience had become a powerful lesson in strength, courage, and the importance of standing with those you love. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for her mother, for the support she had received, and for the opportunity to learn and grow through the experience. The memory of that day would stay with her, shaping the way she approached challenges, injustice, and moments of fear in the future. The girl understood that life would continue to present obstacles, but she now had a stronger sense of herself and her ability to navigate difficult situations. She felt empowered, knowing that courage, support, and clarity could turn moments of fear into moments of growth. She carried with her the lessons of that day, a quiet strength and resilience that would guide her through life, always reminding her that dignity, fairness, and support could overcome fear and prejudice.